Howdy folks, and welcome to another episode of Mingles with Jingles. But before we crack on with the main event, there's a little treat for you first, because yesterday I went to see my new kitten, Akizuki. It had been a couple of weeks since I'd checked in to see how she was doing. We're going to be collecting her in 2 weeks when she's 12 weeks old. She's 10 weeks old now, and I just thought I'd pop along just to see how she was doing. This is not her. This is one of her brothers and one of her sisters, or possibly two of her brothers. Not really sure. This isn't her either. That's a rag doll making friends with incompetent camera minion Eddie. That's her there, the one with the pink collar. And that's her proud mother, which gives you some idea of what she may end up looking like when she's fully grown. At the moment, of course, it's all about the milk, and she doesn't really have any time for the camera. But this was taken 2 weeks ago when she was only 8 weeks old. And it's amazing how much they grow in the space of just 2 weeks. When we went round to see her yesterday, she was utterly fearless, the first one out of the cage, and then immediately jumped up into the cat tree to play with Corey, who didn't appear to be terribly amused, sitting on the top perch. But this is her. This is the first time I've ever played with her. In fact, really, it's the first time I've ever actually met her. Didn't spend a lot of time with her when she was only 8 weeks old. In fact, we picked her when she was 8 weeks old. So this is the first time she's probably met me, so nice and easy does it. And I have a sniff of the finger. And she's being cautious, of course, but she's not afraid, she's more curious. Like I said, when we arrived and the owners opened the cage, she was the first one out, having a good investigate of everything that was going on. I basically just had a great time playing with her, getting used to my scent, so that I'm not a complete stranger when I turn up 2 weeks from now in order to take her home for good. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, this is Akizuki. Anyway, that's quite enough for looking at pictures of cats on the internet for one day. What is this channel becoming? So, anyway, Akazuki, 10 weeks old. We pick her up in 2 weeks on the 21st of April, and I can't wait. She's absolutely adorable. Actually, you know what? No. Let's talk about cats on the internet some more, just for a bit. Because I recorded this sort of intro to Mingles with Jingles well in advance of actually doing Mingles with Jingles, and in between doing that and sitting down to record this, I took a bunch of snapshots from the video and stuck them up on Facebook. In the space of around about 2 hours, the photo dump of kitten pictures has reached 9,500 people, has 4,500 engagements, whatever the hell they are, 84 comments, 6 shares, and is performing better than 95% of other posts on my Facebook page. Hey guys, I've just put a new video up. Meh. Hey guys, I've just heard the news that the Tank Museum are getting a working panther for Tankfest this year. Yeah. Hey guys, look, pictures of my new kitten, and everybody's brains explode all over their keyboard. That's the secret of success on the internet. It doesn't matter what you do, it doesn't matter what you cover, it doesn't matter how good you are at whatever it is you're doing, just stick some pictures of cats on it. As long as you've got a cat and a camera, you will do well online. I will of course have the camera handy when I go to collect young Akazuki 2 weeks from now. I'm going to be documenting all of it, and of course we have 2 cats and a dog at home as well. And I've spoken about this before, but it bears repeating. While Akazuki is used to being around other animals because she's come from a breeder with lots and lots and lots of other cats, she's not used to these 2 cats, or Boo, the dog. Plus, it's going to be a big enough change for her moving from her current home to here, where she's going to live for the rest of her life, so we want to give her time to get used to that. So for the first 3 days, it's just going to be me and Akazuki in the man cave. Juicy, Boo and Crystalline are not going to be allowed into the man cave for the first 3 days, and that's probably going to be especially tough on Juicy, because she's a bit of a daddy's girl. It doesn't really matter what I'm doing, or where I'm doing it, as long as she can be near me while it's happening, she's perfectly happy. Right now, she's actually trying to murder her own tail. I've got a cat tree right next to the computer desk where I record everything. She's sitting on the top shelf right now. I don't know what her tail ever did to her. Seriously. It's the sort of thing you expect of a kitten. She's nearly 9 years old. She's an idiot. But we love her, and she definitely loves me. So having minimal contact with me for the first 3 days while Akazuki's here is going to be a bit tough on her, but I'll have to make an effort to make a fuss of her as and when I can. But keeping them separated for the first 3 days, it's obviously Akazuki's going to have a lot to handle moving into a new home, but also we don't want to stress out the existing pets as well with the new cat. So we're kind of breaking them into each other gently. Get them used to each other's scent first, because they'll know that there's a new cat in the house, they'll smell it. And likewise Akazuki gets used to the scent of the other 3 while they're pawing at the door, wanting to get in and see what all the fuss is about. And then after the 3rd day, we're going to start introducing the existing pets to the new kitten, one at a time, taking it nice and easy. I'm going to be filming all of this, of course. I'm not really anticipating Akazuki being much of a problem. I mean, I don't think Boo's going to like her much, but well, he doesn't really like the 2 other cats, but he just leaves them alone, and they leave him alone, and it's fine. But you never know. He might get along with Akazuki, but I'm not expecting him to. He's getting on a bit. He's a bit stuck in his ways. He knows what he likes, and he likes what he bloody well knows. Juicy, the big ginger cat, I'm sure she's going to be fine with her. I think the only potential problem we might have with Juicy is that she might be a bit rough. She likes to play. She never really stopped being a kitten. And sometimes she forgets how big she is. But Akazuki's going to be a very, very big cat. Not immediately, of course. Maine Coons take anything between 3 to 5 years to grow to their full size, but she's going to be as big as you. So that's going to be good, because at the minute Juicy tries to play with Crystalline, the little cat, who's like a 1/3 of Juicy's size, and Crystalline doesn't like it. So I think Ju gets a little bit bored, and Crystalline gets a bit stressed, so having Akazuki around I think might be really good for both of the other cats. but I'm sure it's going to be fine. And like I said, I'm going to be filming all of it, so I'm not sure at the moment whether or not we'll be doing what I did today and sneaking kitten segments into episodes of Mingles with Jingles, or whether or not I'll actually do separate bonus videos. I mean, it's not going to replace the usual content. Yeah, I'll probably do individual kitten videos, because I've been documenting the whole process. We've seen Akazuki, when I didn't even know which one was going to be Akazuki when the litter of kittens were 4 weeks old. We've seen them at 8 weeks old, where we picked out the one that we were going to have, and we've seen her at 10 weeks old, and the next time we see her, she's going to be 12 weeks old, and she's going to be moving in with us. And then we have the whole getting used to a new home thing to document, and then we have the whole introducing her to the other pets thing to document, and I'm really looking forward to it. Anyway, moving on swiftly. World of Tanks, April Fool's Gag. World of Tanks Classic server. Did anybody download, install, and play World of Tanks Classic? I did try, but after sitting in a queue for 2 hours, I just kind of gave up and didn't try again. Nevertheless, I have been watching other people play it on Twitch, and it is very much like the old World of Tanks that we all knew and loved. I'm curious though. I mean, first of all, props to World of Tanks for developing something as special as this for an April Fool's mode. I wasn't really expecting a great deal from World of Warships, given how busy they've been recently with the carrier rework. And World of Warships trotted out the space battles again, which is fine. But World of Tanks really pulled out all the stops for this. The thing that struck me, however, was that on the one hand, it's a great thing to do for April Fool's Day. There's obviously a lot of work and effort gone into it. And it's going to be a nostalgia trip for a lot of players, and it's going to be an eye-opener for the newer players who didn't play World of Tanks prior to the introduction of physics and had no idea what crusty old stodgers like me are going on about when I talk about the old days in World of Tanks. But at the same time, I can't help but feel that it was a very clever thing for World of Tanks to do as well, because there's a lot of talk around World of Tanks about how things were better in the old days, and the new changes to World of Tanks have ruined the game, and so on and so on. And I think it was a smart move from World of Tanks to show you just exactly what things were like back in the old days. And I'm willing to bet that when they were developing this thing for April Fool's Day, they were given a very specific design brief. Make it fun, but not too much fun. We don't want people saying, oh, this was great, can we make the real game like this? Because the thing is, people have a habit of remembering the good things. In English we say, the past is always viewed through rose-tinted glasses. And I think that's certainly very true. As a perfect example, my friend Eddie did manage to sit through the logging queues and actually get into World of Tanks Classic, and he had a mission. He wanted to unlock the KV-1S. For those of you who haven't been playing World of Tanks for a couple of years, the KV-1S used to be ridiculously overpowered at Tier 6. It was basically a sort of Tier 6 version of the IS at Tier 7. It had the IS's gun at Tier 7. It just wasn't as accurate. It took a long time to aim, but that didn't really matter with the KV-1S, because you just basically rolled right up to the enemies and derped them in the face with this massive 122mm gun. The reason it worked as well, and the reason why the KV-1S was so ridiculously overpowered, was because of the matchmaking, rather than any specific strengths of the tank itself. I mean, yeah, it did have a very good gun for a Tier 6 heavy, but back in the day, it used to fight Tier 3s. The reason why the KV-1S was so popular was because when it was top tier, or even when it was just one tier under top tier, it could effectively one-shot at least half of the tanks on the enemy team. Then that was down to the matchmaking, rather than the KV-1S itself. And everybody remembers that about the KV-1S, and has very fond memories about the tank because of that. But what they forget is that the matchmaker worked the other way as well. And so Eddie got himself onto the World of Tanks Classic server, ground his way to the KV-1S as quickly as he possibly could, spent a bit of gold and free XP, then he hit that battle button, and he was fighting Tier 10s. And then he was fighting tier 10s. And then he was fighting tier 9s. He never once got into a game where he was top tier in the KV-1S. You see, these are the things that people forget. People remember the glorious 122mm gun and how it could one-shot, if you were top tier, it could one-shot almost every tank on the enemy team, unless you were facing other KV-1Ss. But they forget that it also had a 12-second reload. Worse if you only had a 50% crew. So, I have no doubts whatsoever that Wargaming's design brief when they were developing this classic server were make it fun, but remind everybody of what was bad about World of Tanks, so that they don't all start clamouring for a lot of the things that are on the classic server to come back, and yet at the same time. I was very surprised to see everybody's attitude towards artillery on the classic server. Do you remember what artillery used to be like, particularly top tier artillery, with armour-piercing ammunition? I have many fond memories of driving my IS-7 across the battlefield and then being obliterated from full health to nothing by a T-92 dropping an armour-piercing bomb on my head. And yet people appear to be getting quite nostalgic about that sort of thing. Now, I acknowledge that while that sort of thing makes for a good clip in a YouTube video about how ridiculous artillery is, it didn't actually happen that often. But it was intensely annoying when it did. And it was stuff like that that led to the artillery change in World of Tanks, and the introduction of the stun mechanic, and the removal of armour-piercing ammunition, and artillery firing faster, more accurately, but doing far less damage, but having that really annoying stun. And so artillery kind of went from being something that generally missed 75% of the shots that they fired, but had large splash damage and maybe did some damage, blew your tracks off, and then every now and then just wiped you out, to something that is constantly niggling away at you. Not doing a whole lot of damage, but just doing small amounts of damage all the time, and keeping you permanently stunned when you're trying to fight other tanks. Artillery went from being something that would induce keyboard-destroying fits of rage whenever they scored a direct hit, which didn't happen that often, but the consequences of which were catastrophic. I mean, kiss goodbye to your whole tank. And even if it didn't wipe your tank out in one shot, every crew member and module would be wounded or damaged, and you wished it had wiped you out in one shot because your tank was written off. And of course, we didn't have repair kits and first aid kits on cooldown. You got one use out of it, and once it was done, it was done. So it went from that to something that just pisses you off all the time. rather than having one rare catastrophic hit, it's now something that just will not leave you alone, hitting you with the stun over and over and over, and just winding you up constantly. And people seem to actually be more nostalgic for the bad old days of when artillery could absolutely wipe you out in one hit, rather than what we currently have. So it was very interesting to see that World of Tanks are looking at changing the stun mechanics. They're rebalancing artillery again. It's going to be doing even less damage, and it's going to be stunning far less. There's actually a video up. It does a fairly good job of explaining the proposed changes, but the TLDR version is less damage overall, greatly reduced stun duration. You're basically going to get, amongst other things, diminishing returns on stuns, so you're not going to be perma-stunned even if artillery is hitting you over and over and over. So, on the one hand, I can't imagine too many people being greatly upset by this news. But on the other hand, how can I put this? What's the point in playing artillery now? Or, when these changes go through, assuming they go through as planned. And again, I can't see a huge amount of people being terribly upset by this. If this means that less people play artillery, if more people think there's just no point to doing this anymore and they stop playing artillery altogether, I suspect the majority of people would be quite happy. But there are still people who do play artillery. Clearly they're in a minority, but I'm willing to bet that there are a lot of disabled gamers out there who play artillery because, well, let's be honest here, it's easier to play than a real tank. I'm really not sure what to think about this, beyond the obvious, woohoo, less people playing artillery, which, means less artillery in games. Which you'd assume would be a natural consequence of this kind of change, and those artillery players who are still, sticking to their guns, as it were, are doing less damage, and they're not stunning you as much. But at the same time, while it's hard to see this as anything but a good thing, there are still a sizable minority of players out there who play artillery purely and simply because it's the only thing that they can play due to whatever physical or mental disabilities they're suffering from. I do realise I'm swimming against the tide here. I mean, I know that I'm unlikely to be eliciting much in the way of sympathy from the overwhelming majority of World of Tanks players for the plight of the small, disabled community who play artillery because it's the only vehicle class in World of Tanks that they actually can play with any degree of proficiency. And I do understand. I mean, I'm under absolutely no illusions here that while I am, trying to at least draw the attention of the able-bodied World of Tanks player community to the disabled World of Tanks player community in light of this news and the possible effect it's going to have on the disabled community, I do realise that the likely responses from the overwhelming majority of World of Tanks players are going to range from I don't care to tough shit, get over it, because at the end of the day, nobody likes artillery. Anyway, we're rapidly coming to the end of this episode of Mingles with Jingles, and we're going to close off with the return of On This Day in History. So, on the 8th of April in the year 217 AD, the Roman Emperor Augustus Caracallus was fatally stabbed while stopping to take a piss by the side of the road on his way to Turkey. He was stabbed by one of his own soldiers, who went by the name of Justin Martialis. Martialis was a bit upset because the emperor had refused to promote him to centurion. Martialis was able to penetrate the ranks of the elite Praetorian Guard, sneak up behind the emperor and stab him repeatedly in the back while he stood by the side of the road with his dick in his hand, because he'd been put up to it by the prefect of the Praetorian Guard, a man by the name of Macrinus, who wasted no time whatsoever in avenging his beloved emperor's death by executing the assassin in order to keep him quiet, and immediately had himself proclaimed emperor. Unfortunately for Macrinus, while he was a fairly lousy prefect of the Praetorian Guard, he was an even worse emperor. You'd think that after having had his emperor assassinated and then taking his job while on the road to Antioch in Turkey, his first act would have been to load up the wagons, turn around, and head straight back to Rome in order to solidify his power base. You'd think that, and you'd be wrong, because Macrinus's first act was instead to send a messenger back to Rome saying, by the way, I'm in charge now, and then loaded up the wagons and continued on the way to Turkey. And then attempted to rule the Roman Empire sort of by messenger from Antioch in Turkey. Unsurprisingly, this didn't go down too well in Rome. His aunt discovered that a soldier in the 3rd Gallic Legion by the name of Elagabalus was in fact an illegitimate child of the previous emperor Caracalla, and his aunt wasted no time whatsoever in using this Elagabalus character to whip up a revolt against the sitting emperor Macrinus. Let's just say things didn't work out too well for the new emperor. In fact, his reign as Roman emperor was distinguished by two things. In all the time that he was the Roman emperor, he never once saw Rome. The other remarkable thing about his reign as emperor was how incredibly short it was. It lasted exactly 14 months before he was arrested and executed by the illegitimate son of the man that he had had assassinated in the first place in order to have himself declared emperor. So, two things we've learnt from this whole tragic, sorry tale. First and foremost, knocking off the emperor and having yourself declared emperor in his place is a good start, but it's only a start. You have to make sure there aren't any annoying, illegitimate or legitimate heirs lying around who might take exception to the fact that you've just had their father murdered and raise a revolt against you. And secondly, if you're going to declare yourself emperor of the Roman Empire, be in Rome. Get it? Rome? Roman Emperor? The clue's in the title. And that is it for this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you all had a great weekend. And as always, take care. And I'll catch you next time.